Let's Talk is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to Let's Talk, episode 62, brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network. Howdy all, Father Corey Stika. Welcome to Let's Talk, our SQPN community podcast. Glad you could join us. We've got a couple of returning panelists to talk about an interesting topic from the Catholic Church. First, Pat's with us again this week. She liked it so much last week she came again. So how's it going, Pat?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. And then Barb Gilman is also with us. How's it going, Barb?
I am doing well. I really enjoyed my 3-day weekend.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Now, school just started, though. You can't be already looking forward to a 3-day weekend.
Oh, my gosh, yes. I slept 12 hours Friday night.
That works.
Oh, my goodness.
We've been in school for 2.5 weeks.
Okay, so. 2.5 weeks. I think here, if I remember right, it was a week and a half. So, a lot of schools are starting, before Labor Day, because then they can get done Memorial Day, and then there are others that they'll be starting here in the next couple of weeks so that they get started after Memorial Day. So it's always a little bit confusing where you get some places a little earlier than others, but it works as long as they get their time in, right?
That's right.
So, well, this week we're going to talk about relics, about one of those things that a lot of Catholics maybe we're familiar with. We've at least seen them. Maybe Catholics aren't as familiar with them as we should be. I know there's a lot of non-Catholics that are, why are you Catholics doing that? So we're going to talk about this part of our faith, that's something that really connects us to the saints and everything. So Barb, let's start with, what is a relic?
Well, a relic is a part of a saint, and it is divided into 3 types: first class, second class, and third class. And first class is of the saint, maybe a bone or a piece of hair. Second class is an item the saint had, like Padre Pio's glove. And a third class is something that was touched to the first class relic.
Right.
And I love teaching my third graders that. They get very excited and they go home and they tell their parents. And then when I tell them that a first class relic is something from them, they say, even my toenails? And I said, well, I guess it could be when you're a saint.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny when this was before I was in the seminary. I had some friends who their van was chosen to shuttle around St. Therese of Lisieux's relics around the St. Louis, Missouri area. And so they joked that their van was now a third class relic of St. Therese. But Exactly. No, and third class relics are probably the most common you'll see, because a lot of times they're like a holy card or a piece of cloth or something like that that's touched to relics of this particular saint. Anytime you go to a shrine of a particular saint, they'll have tons and tons of these third class relics because they'll people will go in and you'll do that. They'll volunteer to touch these objects to the saint's relics so that people can take them home. Now, getting a second class or first class relic is a little more difficult because there's obviously only so many of them, and a lot of times when you see one, it's either because your church has one. A lot of churches will have of course, the altar has first class relics in it, but also they might have the little reliquaries, the little stands with the relics in it. or they might be traveling. Like I mentioned, St. Therese Lisieux. This was back in about the year 2000. Her relics came to the United States. I guess you could say her. You know, a lot of times we talk about the relics. We talk about it being the person themselves. More recently, we had both Padre Pio, relics from Padre Pio, and relics, the heart of St. John Vianney, come through our diocese over the last couple of years. So got to venerate those. Why do we keep these things, though? What do you think, Barb?
Well, I like it makes me feel more connected to the saint, and the saint. Oh gosh, what else can I say about it? It just makes me feel more connected to the saint. I have a devotion to Saint Therese, and when I saw her relics in 2000, that what got me going on the going to see relics. I don't know. What else can I say about it? Pat, save me.
Yeah, what do you think, Pat?
I was just thinking that, I have things of my mom's, and I have things of my dad's. I have my mom's prayer book. I have things that she had, and these things mean something to us. Mm-hmm. And somebody in one of the things I was reading was saying, well, saints are like our friends. And so keeping a relic of your friend that you can look at, can touch, can think about, can pray with, it just makes us, more connected and feeling more like a part of the family of God. Sure. And that's how I view it.
Well, absolutely.
Beautifully said. Wow.
Yeah.
And being a part of the communion of the saints. For me, I have a very special reliquary in my classroom, and it's of Saint Rosalia. Mm-hmm. And she is a virgin saint from Italy. And my mother had it, and I did not know. And when she died in 2011, and we were cleaning out the house, I found it with its papers. It was so exciting with the papers. It was in Italian. Oh no, it was
Latin.
in
Latin.
Yes. And her brother, who is a Franciscan, picked it up for her in Italy in like 1957 or 58. Wow. And she had that the whole time. So since my mom's name is Rosalie, I really feel connected to St. Rosalia. And her feast day is September 4th coming up. So I think my classroom should have a special celebration that day to remember her.
Absolutely. Well, and it's important too. We are corporeal beings. We are physical beings, and the physical is important to us, so that it's one thing to learn about the saints and to get to know them that way, through prayer and so on. But sometimes it helps us too to have the physical to look at, to touch, to, that get our senses involved as well to remember this person, and again, like talk about what Padre Pio's relics go through. There are things like one of his gloves, or one of the wrappings that he put over the stigmata, a little bit of his beard, a little trimming of his beard, and things like that. Again, to remember these. And so his robe too. Actually, that was a privilege for me as a priest. Is I got to help fold up his robe, which means I got to touch the robe. Because you couldn't touch these things. You could pray in front of them, and they had one like a relic, like a bone chip or something like that you could touch holy cards to. But there was in venerate and kiss, but there's the other relics you couldn't touch, but I was able to help. And I was like, you really want me to do this? I mean, this is obviously a very priceless object. And no, Father, you can help with that. Okay. I'm not going to complain.
Cool.
So how long was it before you washed your hands?
Yeah, I know, right?
But what a cool experience. You still remember that, and you have a connection to him.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as a priest, he is an exemplar of a priest. He's one of those models that we priests should be looking towards. So it's like, okay, this is awesome. But
did you also to see St. John Vianney's heart?
Yes, we did. It was a year later. He came. They brought him through, and it worked out really well because they needed to go from South Dakota to the other side of Montana. So they tried to get it one in each diocese, and so we had a parish that was right in the middle that they could stop for the night and have a veneration and everything. So it worked out really, really well.
Well, and when it was in Omaha, it was during the day, and I was teaching, and I was so close to getting a sub so I could go.
Oh, wow.
Even just for like the afternoon or whatever, so you could run over real quick. Yeah.
Yes. I'm running over to go see a relic.
Field trip for the kids. No.
Yeah.
My husband is a member of the Third Order of Mount Carmel, Carmelite order. And for a while, we had in our home a relic from one of the lay Carmelites that was from Spain, I believe. And she was actually a blessed. She's not a full saint yet. But at any rate, so I was asking him the story of that today. And evidently she was a consecrated virgin and opened her home for classes to young women who were poor and lived an exemplary life. But yeah, it's something when you say, this was in my home. This was, it's again, that connection. My son-in-law has a relic from Pier Giorgio that he is, yes, he's very connected to him. And so whenever I go to their house, there's a little prayer altar that they have with that relic. And I think there's one other, third-class relic of some sort that he has there. But and the children all know about it and can talk about it, and that's their saints.
Yeah.
Or they're blessed, yeah.
Well, and my friend, her aunt has a relic, and I guess they're gonna have to put it in the will to see which niece gets the relic. Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, that is kind of interesting. Again, when we're talking about like these first and second class relics, they are very difficult to get. Now, do either of you know the process how you do that?
I do not. And my students ask me, how much does it cost? And I know you cannot buy a relic.
Right. Now, the way the church phrases it is you can buy the reliquary, but you can't buy the relic itself. Now, unfortunately, as you kind of mentioned in your notes here, Barbara, as I'm kind of looking through them, every once in a while, relics will show up on something like eBay. And usually, if you report it, it's taken down right away. Mm-hmm. But I think, as I understand it, and hopefully you can find out more and let people know. But you have to basically contact the Congregation for Saints over in Rome, and there is a special department for that, a special group that is responsible for handling the relics. So that if you want to get an official relic, there's a place in Rome you have to contact, and a lot of times you have to give a good reason. You can't just say, "Well, I'd really like to just have a little bone chip of St. Francis of Assisi because I really liked him." If they did that, there'd be nothing left. There'd be nothing left of St. Francis of Assisi. Yes. But if you contact this office in Rome, and then they can put you in contact with whoever is responsible for handling the relics for each particular saint, because that's the other thing too is each saint has someone who's responsible for it. Now, so, like if, God willing, Fulton Sheen is named saint someday or blessed soon, hopefully, you'd contact someone in Peoria, Illinois, since they've moved his body to Peoria so the process can continue. There would be a person in that diocese or in the cathedral or wherever he is that would be responsible for, okay, you have a reason for having a relic of this saint, and they retrieve it and put it in its packaging and write up all the paperwork like you talk about. Real saints relics have actual documentation, kind of like an antique. You go to an antique auction, and some of them will have records and everything. Well, same thing with saints. We have records of which where the saint came from, who did the work, and authenticating this relic, because of course, like anything else, there are frauds too.
Yes.
People will get a reliquary and put who knows what the thing is, that they'll put in there and say, oh yeah, this is a part of St. Francis of Assisi. I think it's a chicken bone.
Well, and I know, because my first class relic of St. Rosalia, it has like wax on the back of it. So
they still do like the wax seal, the red wax seal, like you see in the movies for sealing letters and things like that. Pat, do you have?
I'm just imagining my Uncle Father John in Rome, going through this this huge store with relics. This is what I was imagining. I had no idea that's how you did this. So I was imagining he's going through, looking at the alphabet and looking at the names. He goes, oh, I'll to get Rosalia from my sister Rosalie.
Yeah,
But he also got Maria Goretti.
Oh,
Is it
wow.
Maria Goretti? For his sister Jane. So
Okay.
my
cool.
aunt has that first class relic. So
That's awesome too. Yeah.
what a nice gift that a big brother got for his sisters.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. I wish I could.
Well,
get
as
over
I was
Rome.
reading, I noticed that I was reading up on this before our talk tonight, and it looked like that they had revised the rules for relics recently in 2017 to try to tighten down and show validations and especially when there were surviving relatives of the saint, because that's happening more and more.
Right.
That we're seeing more and more recent saints.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that this is to try to cut down on the rampant problems with invalidated or fake relics.
Well, and also making sure that they're not dispersing the relics too widely. You know, I mean, you can imagine there's an actual legitimate concern where they could just run out of the saint or have so little
Disappear,
actually
yeah.
there
Right.
at the shrine, where, at his actual burial spot, his or her actual burial spot, that could actually be a legitimate concern. So I'm sure they're careful about that as well. It is kind of funny though, if you look back through church history, relics and moving relics has been some of the
Humorous.
controversies in the in the church history. We know of saints whose relics were moved, whether the authorities at where it came from actually wanted to be or not. You hear some of the stories of the Crusades and things like that. And actually, a few years ago, I can't remember what saint it was, but there was a saint that was in Milan, I want to say it was, and they gave it back to Jerusalem, the church in Jerusalem where it had originally come from. So I think there's kind of a movement now to restore some of those things that had been taken during things like the Crusades and throughout the history of the church, to try to restore that, to restore the relationships between the different churches, the Orthodox and the Catholic churches and so on. So I can understand they want to be a little more careful about that now. Keep track of them.
Right. Well, in one of the stories I was reading, and I don't remember the details, but it was supposedly a saint from like the 1400s or maybe even earlier than that there had been quite a cult that had grown up in the little village and had her bones enshrined, and people would come, and there were supposedly miracles about it. When they examined the bones, they were goat bones.
Oh.
They really were not her bones.
Right.
But the town just could not let that go, even though the church came along and said, well, she may have been a beautiful person and she may have been a saint, but these are not her
This
bones.
is not her.
That's it.
No.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So it's something that the church is obviously very careful about, because this is an important part of our faith, is venerating these relics, is, praying to the saints, asking the saints for intercession, and having these relics to remind us and to help us in our seeking his or her intercession. So, obviously the church wants to be very, very careful about that, because on the flip side, there have been saints that have been proven based off their relics.
Right.
Probably the most well-known example is St. Peter himself. The first pope, our Lord's, the one given the keys to the kingdom and all that. And for years, we've known that, oh, yes, St. Peter's Basilica, the altar is built on top of his relics, on top of his grave, but we never had the grave. We never knew where the grave actually was until they started excavating underneath St. Peter's Basilica, and there they were, right under the altar, right where we thought they were. And there's markings on the tomb and everything, saying that this is Peter of Galilee. I can't remember. I don't know exactly what it says, but that prove that, yes, this was the tomb of St. Peter.
Wow.
And
Wow. Do you know what saint is on your altar, Father Corey?
I do not. That's one thing it's hard to find out. I don't know if dioceses ever keep records of that. Sometimes if the altar stone is removed for some reason, say because the altar is deconsecrated and a new altar is put in or something like that, it is marked on the back, but every one I've ever seen, they're always done in pencil.
Oh,
so they're really hard to read. Like I have a couple altar stones actually here in the house from previous churches where they kept the altar stone when the churches were deconsecrated and later destroyed, torn down. I can't read the writing, so I don't know who the saints were, because I know it is listed on there, and I just don't know who it is. And it would be, if anybody out there listening knows how to find these out, like if it is a typical thing dioceses keep, let us know. I think there's a lot of churches like that, a lot of parishes like that have these old altar stones, and it would be interesting to figure out where they, who it was, and especially the altar stone that's in the altar now, who it is that is there, because every altar is supposed to have, if not on the top of the altar, somewhere within the altar structure or underneath, there is to be a saint. Generally, it's.
And could they do DNA or on it?
The question is, how much of it is there actually there? And of course, it's sealed within this marble stone. So you'd have to basically break the stone open, break the seals on it, and then
damage
possibly damage it. I mean, like I know on the altar stone on the main altar here, you can see where it was cut out of the stone, and then a seal was put in, and it was basically epoxied or something like that in, so it might be easy to remove. But
gosh, when you think about that is just such a cool thing for being Catholic to have that. Every altar has that. That's just cool.
Yeah, ours parish is St. Louis, King of France, and we have a relic in our altar stone, as well as another reliquary with one of his pieces or bone or something.
That's awesome.
In it, and so that's always been real special to me in our parish.
Oh, absolutely. Well, ours is St. Mary's, so I doubt we have a relic of St. Mary. No, obviously not.
Probably not that St. Mary.
no, definitely not. No, but it's it doesn't necessarily have to be the one of the church. It does happen, but very likely this is other saints that were available at the time these churches were being built or whatever. And again, it's probably the same kind of thing where they would write to Rome, and Rome would say, okay, here you go, here's an altar stone type of deal, with this saint, and then the records were lost. One thing that's interesting though is because of these altar stones, the extraordinary form, the traditional Latin Mass, made it very explicit that there was a saint present, a saint's relic present there. As the priest goes up the altar, so he has the prayers at the foot of the altar, and then as he goes up, he's saying some prayers silently. And the second of the prayer, he says, "We beseech thee, O Lord, by the merits of thy saints, whose relics are here." And then he kisses the altar stone, kisses the altar where the relics are, and of all the saints, that thou will deign to pardon me all my sins. So that prayer, unfortunately, isn't in the ordinary form, but in the extraordinary form, it's explicit that the priest is venerating the saint who is present, whose relics are present in the altar.
Wow, very cool.
It's really, really neat. A really neat part of the Mass, and a part of our again of the practice of we have the relics of a saint there as we're celebrating Mass. Now, Pat, do you have any personal experience? I know Barb and I have both spoken about kind of our personal experiences with venerating relics. How about, do you have any personal?
We went to Italy, and saw very many, bodies in different places where they would have a glass enclosed in the body of the saint there, or portions of the body. The strangest one, it was the hardest to look at, was the head of St. Catherine. And because that was, it's like it is. It's just her head, because her body was taken someplace else.
Right.
And that kind of reminds me that people talk about Catholics really do have this kind of weird stuff that we do, and it's kind of funny at times, but it's true that they're almost like family, and so we have our own personal jokes about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing the head of St. Catherine of Siena was a little odd, and seeing that right in front of me.
Right.
The closest thing I have personally is I unfortunately I don't have it anymore. I had a letter from Bishop Sheen as a child. And I looked through the house all weekend with all the stuff that I had saved in a suitcase from what my mom had, and it's not here.
Oh.
But I would have loved to have had that. And who knows where along the line, years ago, it got accidentally slipped out of the box of stuff. But anyway, that was the closest I've come. So I've touched that letter.
Yeah, there you go. Now, one thing I do want to mention, we kind of joke about it, but a person cannot be a relic. A third class, a living person cannot be a relic.
Oh, darn.
It does have to be it does have to be a non-living object. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, because there could be issues with that. But anyways, no, and joke about the van, or again, like I said, third class relics. A lot of times they're holy cards, rosaries, pieces of cloth,
yeah,
something like that was touched to like the reliquary of the particular saint. So a lot of times people will go to a place where there's a reliquary and they'll touch their rosary to it. They'll touch they'll get a holy card of the saint. Especially, I have actually have it in my breviary, but I have a holy card for Saint John Vianney that I touch to his heart, so things like that.
That's a good idea to do a holy card, because I just do my little rosary, my travel rosary. But now I was thinking, gosh, that'd be a good idea, because then you have a holy card, which saint you have touched it. Well,
exactly.
And my most recent one was Saint Ignatius on his feast day. I went to Creighton University, and the parish there, St. John's, had a big mass. It was so cool. It was packed. Everybody was there.
Nice.
And they brought out the relic. Then they also blessed water with the relic. I don't know if they immersed. I mean, there were so many people I couldn't see what they were doing. Would they have been immersing the relic? In the water?
I don't know if they would have immersed the entire relic. They might have done like we do with the Easter candle, where you put the base of it into the water.
Oh, okay. That's
so.
probably what. Yeah, and they were so nice. They bought all those little holy water bottles, and you can just go up and get your holy water.
The little 1 ounce, little mini bottles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was really cool, and to do that. So, I feel like I'm a relic groupie.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's kind of like a pilgrimage too. I have my 3 really good girlfriends, and when Padre Pio's relics were in Lincoln, is like an hour away. We all got in the car and we went and had lunch, and it was just like a nice Catholic outing.
Oh yes, yeah. That's kind of the fun thing, is when there are special things like that, you can make a trip out of it and have fun. One thing that was a great privilege for me is to have gone to the Holy Land twice. And so I was able to take my rosary that I carry with me, and I was able to touch it on the at Calvary, or where the cross hung. There's a stone there where you can reach. There's a hole you can reach in and touch the stone on the slab where we believe that Jesus laid after he was taken down from the cross, and then of course the tomb itself. Which if you remember seeing in the news, a couple years ago, they completely rehabilitated that shrine. That's the shrine, but the actual crypt, because it was falling apart. And as they dug it down, they could see that yes, this had always been venerated as our Lord's tomb. So we know that it really is the location where it happened. Of course, that's also thanks to the Roman Empire for building their temples over the top of the Christian sites. So thank you, Roman Empire, for making sure we know this. But
marking them,
for marking them for us. But it's a wonderful experience to be able to to touch these spots where our Lord suffered, died, and then rose. And again, it is as a way of a relic. Of course, we don't literally have relics of our Lord because he did rise from the dead, but we also receive him in Holy Communion. So little different circumstance there.
Yes.
I loved reading one of the stories that I had read as I was looking through things today was about the barber of let me see, who was it?
Oh, Maximilian Kolbe.
Yeah, Maximilian Kolbe.
Oh, sure.
That the barber saved all the clippings. And so because his body was destroyed and burned, we would not have had anything, but he had these clippings of his beard and hair. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, and there goes my husband saying, "Would you like my clippings?"
Yeah, there you
he
go.
trims his beard.
Save them for later.
Maybe I should save them.
I'm not too worried about that for me. Trust me. No, it is interesting though. There are a lot of saints that people realized during their lifetime that these people were going to be saints. Padre Pio's one of them. Maximilian Kolbe. Again, these are more recent ones. There are ones that go further back, where that they knew in their lifetime they were going to be saints. And so people would take their clothes, they would, like after they'd wear them, they'd send them out to laundry and they just wouldn't come back. Again, would keep clippings of their beard and their hair and things like that. So it is kind of funny how people would start collecting these relics before the person was even dead. But it is good because then we have them now. So
yeah,
right.
Our one of our local Catholic stores used to display a strand of hair when Mother Teresa visited Omaha.
Oh, sure.
And I think they had to get the official, paperwork because they might have done something like that. She was walking by and I can't imagine gathered it up.
Exactly. Yeah, who knows? Yeah, it's kind of funny how that might work out. But no, you think of all the people that it's kind of a long tradition for popes to change out the hats, where the white Zacchetto. And so, there's people that John Paul II did that, where he would wear it for, about a minute and then change it out and put the next one on, wear it for a minute. It's a second class relic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he owned it for 2 minutes or whatever, that he wore it. But I think that's considered a second class relic anyways. But it's interesting, all the different kind of the relic hunting. Now, for those who aren't Catholic, however, let's kind of take it to the other side here. And even some Catholics, this might sound a little strange. Catholics are collecting bones. I was just looking it up. There's places like the famous Capuchin crypt, the Bone Church in Rome. Other places as well do that, where they've got these crypts where all these bones are stored. Why? I mean, it seems like we're almost idolizing these saints. It's just creepy and strange, and it really isn't, is it?
Well,
it's a little odd, but again, to me, it's like family. Keeping the ashes in a place of reverence. For instance, these days, people will have someone cremated and keep their ashes in a place of reverence. To me, it's no different than that. It's just that the person that you're respecting is much more known to be holy. Right.
Yeah,
but it's true that there's been a lot of weird stuff with relics that people who are non-Catholic say, are these magic? And, when people talk about miracles, well, maybe this is magic. And I kind of wanted to bring that up, that it's not magic.
Absolutely.
It's not a power of their own. It's the grace of God that is coming to us from from contacting that. And that's one of the things non-Catholics kind of think, well, it's not any different than a magic potion or a magic, sword or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And you don't have to, this isn't a requirement of our faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
To venerate or.
Absolutely. When we talk about things that we're required as Catholics to do, stuff, we have to believe in everything the creed professes. We have to, receive our Lord in Holy Communion. We have to receive, the sacraments. The sacraments are a must. The creed is a must. We have to live according, love God above all things, love your neighbor as yourself, the commandments of our Lord. There's these are things that are core elements of our faith. You have to, if you're a Catholic in good standing, you have to do these. You have to believe these. Now, things like venerating relics, having, getting second class, third class relics of saints and so on. That's optional.
It's a bonus.
It's a bonus. You don't have to ever venerate a saint. You don't have to ever pray the rosary. You don't have to do Divine Mercy Chaplet. There's all these things, and relics are a part of that, where you don't have to believe that a single, an apparition, you don't have to believe that a single relic is ever valid or even important. You really don't. That being said, why not? It's frankly, I think it's kind of a cool part of our faith,
Yes.
that we keep these mementos of these very holy people to remind us of this is how we are to live. That even if we have a temper like St. Padre Pio did, even if we aren't, like perfect people, because guess what? None of the saints were perfect in life either. They had to go to confession too. Yeah.
And there's nothing like a chip of a bone, of a saint in your classroom, and it gets the attention of 31 9-year-olds.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah.
There's a bone right there.
Yeah.
And there's also an aspect of these are another way of looking at mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And as Catholics, we are not afraid of death. We are not afraid of the body. We are not afraid of bones.
No.
And I think this really speaks to that, is that, yeah, we'll even take old bones.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. And you mentioned earlier about people who set up little altars or shrines to family members with the ashes. The family members cremated, and they keep the urn in the house. Kind of the stereotypical one is like on the mantle above the fireplace.
Right.
And we have such an interesting strangeness about death, in our world today. So many people don't want to face death. They don't want to face the body after death. I know of people, I've had funerals where the family literally did not want to go to the funeral home to even just have the visitation, the viewing.
I know a lot of people
body.
like that. Yeah.
They wanted the body. They didn't even want to be there when the coroner was there to take the body to the morgue, take the body to the funeral home. It's just they didn't want to see it until it was cremated. Because at that time it's in the nice urn and it's very sterile, and you don't see the body. And other families where they didn't want to have an open casket at the funeral, same reason. It's sterile to see a casket. It's something very different when you see the person in there that is your family member. They did not want to recognize death at all. And on the contrary to that, of course, as Catholics, we honor the body after death. We always bury it. We should always bury it in beautiful places. Cemeteries are always very beautiful, peaceful places where we can honor them. And some cultures, they go to the cemetery as part of their celebration of this person. I can think of, some cultures where the Day of the Dead, All Souls Day, they go and have picnics as a family at their loved one's gravesite.
Right.
So they honor these people by being there where they are buried. Because, of course, we believe that one day we will rise from the dead, body and soul. Our bodies will be regenerated by God.
Well, and other cultures also have had a history of veneration of their ancestors. For instance, in the Eastern religions, often you will find a little shrine in their home with a little cup of sake or a candle or something in front of a picture of the person, and maybe picture several of their family members. Mm-hmm. And so it's a part of humanity to want to respect our ancestors, to respect those of our family who have gone on. And I think it's more modern people, quote, modern, that want to cleanse it, that want it purified, that want it sterile.
Yeah.
And
well, when the fact is, when you don't have any faith, or your faith in God is weak, you can understand that this life is it. So why bother about honoring those who went off to the next? And why recognize the fact that one day we'll be there too?
I think a lot of it is that fear of, they don't want to admit that they're going to be in that position one day too, and they don't want to face that. And it's really sad when you see that. I know I've always, I won't say enjoyed, but I've always appreciated an open casket with family that I've loved, because it is that closure. It is that way to say goodbye. Yep. It is that way to stay in touch in many ways.
Exactly.
But I do know a lot of my non-Catholic family. It's like, I don't make me go there.
Right.
It's scary.
And what's sad is there is very much, and this is speaking as a priest, I've done many, many funerals. There is a sense of closure when you do that. I've seen so many families where they finally get that, okay, this, this is done at the visitation, at the funeral,
Right.
And then I've also seen families where they don't have that. Again, like I talked about, where they didn't want to see the body until after the cremation. And so there really wasn't that sense, that, okay, this, she is moved, our loved one is, he or she has moved on, and we need to as well. It's just, it's really interesting to see that psychologically, to have that conclusion. Yeah.
I know when my father died, our oldest child was only like 4 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so being that young, we asked her if she wanted to go to Grandpa's funeral, and she said no. And so we said, okay. And so we left her at home with somebody to be with her. Years later, she said, I wish you had made me go. I really wished I could have said goodbye to Grandpa. And I said, well, on the other hand, I couldn't see dragging a child to a funeral if they didn't want to go.
Right.
But it's hard at a young age to know whether that brings closure or that's not at the time they're ready for it.
Well,
so I've always regretted that, but I felt like I did the best decision I could at that time.
Well, and it's, again, little kids too. It's hard to know if they're going to really understand what's going on. They might later.
Right.
But,
and as I say, she was like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So it was like I really didn't expect her to understand it, but I thought it might be of comfort later. But she kept saying, no, she didn't want to go. So that's okay.
Yeah.
In our family, my dad was really big on the Corporal Works of Mercy, bury the dead. And so we always went. And I have lots of great memories of those family dinners after the funeral.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So that was
all the stories you tell. It's a leave taking that way.
Yeah. And it's sometimes the families just don't want to even give them a child an option. And it's a healthy, well, especially for the dinner afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able to, visit and tell stories. So that's really important.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing I try to remind parishioners here is our parish will provide a luncheon, and it's usually a potluck, a full potluck dinner. It's incredible. The funeral director always loves coming to our church for funerals because he knows he's going to get fed well.
Yes.
But
I'm a member of our committee for that too.
And I always remind him this is a corporal work of mercy. You are not doing this to raise money for the Parish Council of Catholic Women. You're not doing this, for recognition. You are doing this to provide comfort to the family and to do your part in burying the dead. I did my part with the mass and the gravesite. This is your part. And this is a beautiful thing. And you need to keep this up, because it is a beautiful thing when parishes can do that. I think it's sad. I know in bigger parishes, it's a lot harder to do things like that, but it is sad that idea has gone away, or they go to just, basic, cookies and punch and coffee type receptions instead of an actual meal.
Well, and now with technology, they have one of those sign-up sheets, the Evite or whatever it is, and so just list out, the woman in our parish who does that. She'll say something about the person, and then she'll say, "This is what we need," and boy, we put on a nice meal.
Good. That's a wonderful thing.
I think our parish has a big tradition of doing that too, and
it's understandable that depending on the size of the funeral, it depends on how much work it takes. But especially again, living in a very small town, for us, if we have 200 people at a funeral, that's a big funeral. So it's something that I encourage those who are members of parishes where they have a funeral luncheon committee. Help out, volunteer to say, what, once a month I'd be willing to bring a meal, or, let me know if you have someone fall short, I could do something, or, or even be a part of the committee. It is a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. And they have great recipes, the original funeral potatoes.
Oh, yes. Everybody loves them. The cheesy potatoes. Everybody loves them.
But they're known as funeral potatoes.
Yes, they are.
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
you
that's
hear
what
that
we call it here.
Yeah, you hear that also. I hear that here as well, in Utah especially. I know some folks down there, and for the Mormons, that's what when they talk about funeral potatoes, that's what they're talking about. And everybody always looks forward to them. They're always good. And it's kind of the joke too, in a small town, you look forward to potlucks because everybody's always going to bring their good stuff.
Yes.
Stuff they're good at. So, well, we kind of drift a little bit off relics, but it's still pretty topical. Is there anything else either you would like to mention about relics or funerals or both?
Yeah. No, I just take that opportunity to, if there are some in your town, our local Catholic radio station sponsored the Treasures of the Church. Mm-hmm. And this priest goes around and he has several relics, and he gives a talk, and then you can go, see all the relics he has. And I just make a pilgrimage of it, take some of your friends and check it out. And I just think it's a really cool thing to do.
Well, very good. Pat?
No, I think we've gone through everything I had on my mind.
Well, yeah. Very good, very good. And echo what Barb was saying, is you get a chance to venerate these relics, to see them, again, especially if they're touring, please do go check it out. It is always a great experience. And by the way, usually there will be priests there for the sacrament of confession and so on. So it's a good opportunity to kind of get a spiritual cleansing as well. So take a break before we go to our picks of the week. I want to and thank you again for listening to Let's Talk. We always appreciate all of our listeners, and we appreciate that you enjoy our show enough to listen to it. If you do enjoy it, please do share it with your friends. We always want to get more people to listen and to join in our conversation, because of course this is a conversation between us and you, and we want more people to join in and hear what we have to say, and then maybe even they've got some feedback that they could share with us. So please do share our episodes with your friends. If you haven't, please do subscribe on iTunes. I guess they call it Apple Podcast now, and Google Podcast and Stitcher and all those places where you can find our shows. We are on Spotify. If you listen Spotify, you can find our stuff there as well. If you search for SQPN Incorporated, you'll find it there. Also, if you listen to us through YouTube or Facebook, please do give us likes there. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure to leave comments there. We do see your comments on Facebook and YouTube, and we can definitely go with those as well, as we're going, for talking back to us to continue the conversation. Right now, we're in the middle of a campaign, and so I'd like to take a second to let Dom step in here and to say a few words.
This is Dom Bettinelli of the StarQuest Production Network, and we need your help. Over the past year, we've grown by leaps and bounds. Some of our podcasts, like Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, are among the most popular shows we've ever produced, but that success is in danger. Creating a dozen shows has caused our expenses to rise, and right now, we aren't making ends meet. We must reach the financial break-even point if we're going to continue. If our reserves are depleted, we'll have to cut back many of our shows. We might have to shut down entirely. That's why it's crucial we hear from you right now. Please go to sqpn.com/give and click the Become a Patron button to make your monthly pledge. If you're already a supporter, please consider increasing your pledge. The need is urgent, so please go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give.
Well, thank you very much, Dom, and we do appreciate those who are helping out SQPN, and I want to add my own appeal that if you aren't involved in our Patreon campaign, please do join us. It helps us keep these shows on the air, so to speak. It helps us to keep the server up and running so you can listen to these shows, and it definitely helps, because we do have expenses we need to meet, and we haven't been up to now, so we definitely would like to. We still got some reserves. We're not scraping the bottom of the pan yet, but we definitely need your help. So please do join us at our Patreon campaign at sqpn.com/give. As I've been doing, I would like to thank some of our patrons: Daniel P., Ben H., Peter M., Carl S., and Rick H. Thank you, and thanks to all of our Patreon patrons for your support of SQPN so we can keep these shows going. So let's go ahead and move on to our picks of the week. Pat, what's your pick this week?
Well, it's not a relic, but I have a friend that I had mentioned previously that she makes a lot of artistic things for Catholics. And one of the closest thing to a relic that she has is she makes a handmade reproduction of a ring that Joan of Arc wore. Ooh. And that she has a whole story about the ring, and where it was being kept and who had it and how they, who she gave it to right before she was burned. She gave it to a particular bishop or archbishop, etc. So she makes these replicas of Joan of Arc's rings.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought that's kind of cool.
Well, it's beautiful.
Then on her site, she also has some handmade drawings of recent saints. The Martin parents, for instance,
okay.
And the Coptic saints that were martyrs. And as well as she has a whole lot of medals of very modern saints, as well as some more traditional ones. But so I'll put those the links to those in the show notes as well.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, those would be great. Those are beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah, Barb, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I have a book.
Oh yeah.
Well, the graphic novels are big with my students, my third graders. But the Pauline sisters, they have a series of graphic novels. And I have all of them, of course. And my most recent one is it's on St. John the Baptist. And it's colorful, it teaches the kids. And anything on the Pauline sisters website for kids is great. They're great.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, definitely have to check those out as well. So my pick is a book as well, but it isn't a book about the saints. Instead, it's books about what priests need to do to become saints. It's a book that it just recently came out by author's name's Kevin Wells, and it's part of it. I'm not quite through with it yet, but part of it is kind of a personal appeal on his part for saints to be, or for priests to become heroic. That we need priests to be heroic, to be open, to be powerful in their preaching and just living as a saint, ultimately what it comes down to. But he talks about a priest that he knew as a kid. Actually, it was his uncle who was a priest in outside of in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. Monsignor Wells, Tom Wells. He was one of these very gregarious, open, bold people, very bold in his preaching and very solid in his faith. And he would go into parishes. He was a priest that had to go into parishes and kind of clean up when there were some real issues. There are a number. This was during the time when some of the abuses were starting to come out, and he would have to go in and kind of be the priest to help try to restore confidence in the parish and try to bring people back to the faith and back to trusting again. Because these people had been hurt, and sadly in one parish that he was at, there had been some very bad things going on in the rectory, and a druggie broke into the rectory and he was murdered. It was, terrible experience. But this author, Kevin Wells, he's calling priests to be like this Monsignor Wells, to be bold, to proclaim the good news, to proclaim the faith with boldness, to call people to holiness, to call people to live as Christians, to be disciples. And the fact is, as a priest, I recognize myself, I'm not there. And I think a lot of my brother priests, if they're honest, they would agree with that. They're not there, but we need to be. We need to be bold. We need to be powerful. We need to be saints. You look at some of these saints we talked about. Padre Pio was no shrinking violet. He was bold. He was almost aggressive sometimes in his approach. But he's a saint. He's what the church needed, and the church needs us. Of course, I will add on to this too, to be clear. We need lay people to also be bold and to be brave and heroic. But of course, this book is an appeal to lay people to be doing that. So I echo that, or to priests, excuse me, to be doing that. And so I echo his call, and it's an excellent book. Like I said, it's a personal appeal is what it is. It's not like a lot of these books where they're kind of, telling what it means to be, this kind of priest. No, here's what we need priests to be. I'm appealing to priests. Do this. So check that out. It's sorry, I forgot to mention the name of it, but it's The Priests We Need to Save the Church. We need priests to be bold to save the church. So check that out. We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you both very much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have both of you on, and it's a pleasure to have both of you on the same time. So, Barb, where can people find you?
Well, I am Barb in Nebraska on Twitter and on Instagram.
Oh, very good. And Pat?
I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/themamanerd, THEMAMANERD.
Oh, very good.
And that's where I hang out.
Excellent. And I'm Father Corey Stika. Again, you can find my homilies at frcorey.org. That's, again, I post my homilies there. I haven't done much else with it, but at least it's a place I can post my homilies. My Facebook page is Father Corey Stika, and my Twitter handle is frcorey_stika. If you would like to leave feedback for Let's Talk, especially this episode or any other episode, as I said, you can do it on Facebook and Twitter, or Facebook and YouTube, and we see it there. But you can also send email to letstalk@sqpn.com. We definitely want to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much for listening, and God bless.